of Warcraft's initial release in 2004 is a monumental moment in gaming history that many remember very fondly, but it was also a point in time that redefined gaming as a whole. Classic WoW was a game that was so influential and had amassed such a cult following that tens of thousands of players lined up for the release of its first expansion, the Burning Crusade, and even more for its next expansion, Wrath of the Lich King, which to this day is known as one of the most legendary content releases of all time. One of the reasons that what is now referred to as the classic trilogy of WoW expansions were so popular was and is accessibility. WoW had a much broader appeal than its predecessor EverQuest, the biggest MMORPG at the time that WoW is considered a sort of spiritual successor to. Things were more convenient, like you didn't lose gear or XP when you died, walking back to where you died as an invisible spirit instead of just doing it normally and dying again on the way like in EverQuest. Over the years, the game has had loads of content releases, each with their own ups and downs, and since then the game has sadly degenerated to an overly grindy, min-max, oversaturated microtransaction-ridden game. World of Warcraft players had felt that there was a large disconnect between them and the game devs for a long time. This disconnect between the players, the developers, and what the Warcraft franchise is becomes even more apparent with the lore. The beloved decades-old lore of the Warcraft universe has been changed, retconned, butchered, and outright ruined in recent years, to a point where it doesn't even feel like Warcraft.
What the fuck is this piece of shit?
So you have this thematic shift that messes with the vibe and the feel of the game, which is incredibly important, coupled with the fact that the game requires like 26 different third-party add-ons to play on a beginner level, over-optimization of everything, balancing the fun out of specs and classes, and you end up with a game that progressively panders more and more to an ever smaller hardcore audience. Hardcore players have become the standard instead of outliers, and the core audience of WoW have become ever more dissatisfied with the direction of the current game. If I want to get into a raid in the current retail version of the game, I need better items, much better items, on my character than the best ones that drop in that raid itself to meet the requirements for the groups. Why would I even do the raid if I have those items? Enter 2019, the release of WoW Classic. Finally, Blizzard gave us what we wanted, an older version of the game as it was then.
You think you do, but you don't.
In 2019, Blizzard released the classic version of the game due to player dissatisfaction with the current game, nostalgia, and yearning for old WoW. The need for this game was made apparent when Nostalrius, a private server that was hosted by the community for classic WoW, grew to massive popularity before Blizzard eventually shut it down and released their own classic version, and boy did it go well. The excitement for WoW Classic was through the roof. Things have changed since then, however. If I were to describe it now, the current state of classic World of Warcraft seems to be one of excitement quickly followed by apathy. But why? What happened? And what is this cycle that keeps repeating itself? A new version of classic WoW gets released or fresh servers get announced, everybody gets excited, and the servers are packed. Slowly but surely players lose interest after the first 2 months or so, after taking it slow and the sense of adventure cease, and the competitiveness amongst players begins. The hardcore player base becomes the norm, most players don't want to play like that anymore and they leave. Maybe Blizzard will make a couple of extra mistakes with it, maybe not, and an increasingly smaller amount of players will come back for each content release. Oh, but then fresh servers get announced. Season of Mastery, Hardcore, Season of Discovery. The hype starts up again, and then this cycle just keeps on rolling. In this video, we're gonna dive deeper into why this is happening, because Classic WoW really does have a special place in people's hearts, especially considering that the retail game has gotten to a point where you have to optimize everything and find ways to cut hours out of your grinds. That's why we have Zygor. Look, I know, bold claims. Cutting hours out of your leveling, optimizing gear, gold farming, but it's all true. Zygor is an add-on that gives you optimal ways to level, make gold, farm, gear your character, all in-game. No alt-tabbing to check shit, none of that. It also automates some of the tedious shit in the game, like auto-accepting and turning in quests and automatically selling grays and useless whites whenever you talk to a vendor. Whether you like classic, retail, or even private servers, Zygor works on all of that. And yes, it is 100% TOS friendly. Blizzard are completely fine with this add-on. It's all legit. Real talk though, the reason that I like Zygor so much isn't just because it offers a massive in-game advantage, but it also offers you time. Zygor is an add-on that actually respects your time, and it will save you so much of your time. We're all adults here. We can't just play WoW as much as we could when we were kids, at least most of us can't. Our time is valuable, and again, Zygor will save you so much time. So what are you waiting for? Click the link in the description or here on the screen, and you'll never have to fall behind in this game ever again. Classic WoW has gone down as a sadly rare modern Blizzard W in the eyes of the community, and a massive one at that. But being an old version of a game means that its content is limited, and the entire time that players were experiencing it or reliving their memories in classic Azeroth, we all knew that we were progressing towards its inevitable end. Sure, they eventually ended up releasing its other classic expansions, but this isn't exactly a long-term solution either, because you'll run out of those too. Blizzard did add fresh classic servers, but how many times can you re-release classic? So then what would the future of this beloved classic game be? Because it's not classic mop. The only reasonable solution here would be Classic Plus, an old hypothetical in the classic community. What if the Burning Crusade or other expansions never came out? What if they just kept updating the game and it stayed classic? I mean, WoW was initially planned to be released with a lot more content than it did. I'm gonna leave you guys with a disclaimer though. Keep in mind that a lot of the cut content that I'm gonna talk about here is fact, but a lot of it is also stuff that I heard about throughout the years, watching videos, reading Reddit posts and whatever, and I could not find evidence of it while researching the video. So some of this stuff might be just bullshit that was floating around on the internet. Keep that in mind. Quel'Thalas in Vanilla, Outland, the Emerald Dream, the old version of the Dragon Isles, Old Hyjal. There was even talk of more classes like Death Knights, Demon Hunters, and even Necromancers being part of Classic. There's been a few private servers that did this Classic Plus experiment, and rather successfully I might add. So after a couple of other additions to Classic, such as Classic Era servers, servers that stay on Classic as it was then, Season of Mastery, fresh Classic servers with some minor changes, and hardcore servers where death equals delete, Blizzard finally decided to give it a go themselves, and we got their first attempt at Classic Plus in Season of Discovery. And Season of Discovery started off pretty great. It thematically felt like Classic, but it wasn't the same old thing. It was fresh, it felt new, but in the same time, it felt like Classic. The main selling point of SOD were runes. Basically, back in the days of Classic, the internet was a very different place and you couldn't just look up a guide for everything, so players had to discover everything themselves. This led to people making up a lot of myths and legends about things in the game that weren't actually in the game. The way that you got these runes in Seasons of Discovery is by doing things similar to what players used to do back in those days. This added a lot of exploration to the game, but also, once you've got the rune, you can socket it into your gear and get a new ability or change to an existing ability, improving upon how the classes worked and effectively changing the moment-to-moment gameplay, which was a big deal because you spent most of your time in the game killing shit, and if the way that you kill shit feels fresh, most of the game feels fresh. They also lowered the level cap like some private servers did before it to put breaks between the long leveling, and then added endgame raids that you can play to gear up before the level cap gets increased again. SOD was looking promising, but no king rules forever. One of the experiments that they attempted with SOD was making the raids each phase exponentially harder, which didn't sit well with the player base. The whole point of Classic WoW was to appeal to a more casual audience compared to retail. I can't fathom why they thought this was a good idea. Sunken Temple was one of those raids that got released in this version of Classic, and it quickly became infamous with how much harder it was than what we Classic Andies are comfortable with. A lot of retail players migrated to Classic WoW because of how casual friendly it was, and a lot of players who quit and haven't played in years came back for Classic WoW, and there's clearly a market for a game like Classic WoW. I don't know who at Blizzard thought it was a good idea to stray away from what their player base clearly wants, or why they decided to do so. People who play Classic don't want to play retail, so don't make Classic more like retail. Bebop, your Classic WoW players are complaining about the game being hard. Why don't they just get good? It's not directly about the game being hard. It's about the game's difficulty making the game worse. The particular kind of difficulty that WoW has when it gets hard isn't one where you just play better. It's one where you need to play at an extremely high level, both in terms of skill, but also in gear and player power. And you get to that high level by playing the game religiously. Sure, let there be a hardcore audience. I'm fine with that. But when that becomes the standard, the game becomes pretty much unenjoyable for most players. I like WoW, but I don't want to commit my life to it. Secondly, the added difficulty causes the need for third-party add-ons, and when some players use add-ons, they have an advantage over players who don't, meaning now everyone has to use all these complicated add-ons, and it becomes a requirement for you to have those add-ons in order to get a group. Seem familiar? On top of that, in Phase 1 when the level cap was 25. The runes were so cool. They were so much fun. Blizzard had to do the Blizzard thing and start balancing the fun out of all the new runes. I don't care if some classes are broken. I don't think classic players care if some classes are broken. We just want the game to be fun, not this. Not completely changing the warrior's best rune into something else. Not switching out what items you can socket the warlock runes into so that you can't use them simultaneously anymore. Okay, so you got your favorite chest rune and you got your favorite leg rune. Well, now they're both chest runes, so now you gotta choose between them. The reason I decided to focus on Season of Discovery for this video is because it would have been the future of Classic. Sure, there's something to be said about the Classic expansions too, like microtransactions in the Burning Crusade Classic, the WoW token being added in Wrath of the Lich King Classic, the bots and all that. Classic hardcore. While it was only for a handful of players in a very niche audience, and it is not for most people, it was a great internet phenomenon, and it added to the game's culture, sure. But Classic Plus is Classic WoW's only real long-term hope. I genuinely think that WoW has the best classes in any MMO game, even though they might be more strictly defined and less customizable than other games like ESO. They're incredibly fun to play, I think. I also think that the Warcraft universe has some of the best lore, so running through an empty Ogrimmar in SOD with nobody online felt incredibly disappointing. SOD's longevity is not looking promising. As I mentioned before, Vanilla WoW was planned with a lot more content on release, but it ended up getting cut. Players would discover this cut content from the game and the way that gaming culture and the internet as a whole were at the time. Players would sort of create their own myths and legends about the game and look for things that weren't actually there, trying to discover secrets that weren't even in the game. For example, you've probably noticed that there are these green portals in many zones throughout the game, but when you pass through them, they lead nowhere and they don't do anything. People used to think that it was a way to go into the Emerald Dream and that you need to do something or have some quest or get some sort of item in your inventory in order to go through them. Blizzard now finally made use of these portals for a reputation faction in Classic Season of Discovery, and I like that they're going back to these old popular player mysteries. But even when they do things right like this, their core design philosophy always seems to slip back to the same old shit, only to once again lose players' interest. The game also suffers from some pretty fundamental and basic problems like bots. The bots, I feel like we gotta talk about for a sec. Somehow they haven't fixed the bot issue still, when private servers like Turtle WoW, the biggest Classic Plus server, that you can play on for free, don't have the same botting and economy problems that Blizzard have when they charge a sub, but you also have to buy the game. But if you buy the game, you don't get a month of game time, which is what I feel like it should be like. No, you still gotta get the sub as well anyway, otherwise you basically bought the game for nothing. And they charge microtransactions. But some guy running a damn decent Classic Plus server from his mom's basement in Russia can solve it, but you can't? Like, what are they even doing? I'm gonna end this video on a little rant here. Playing WoW, I've had some of the most memorable moments in my life, and I'm sure a lot of people will agree it sort of like redefines you as a gamer and maybe even to an extent as a person. Every once in a while I do get the itch to play it again, and this sort of idea of classic is what draws me to the game. I really have no interest in retail, or I don't have any desire to come back to it. Like, I tried Shadowlands for a bit, I tried giving Dragonflight a shot, it just does not retain me. I have absolutely no fascination with War Within, I just don't want to play the game, basically. Older versions of the game feel a lot more right to me, and the way that Blizzard is handling it is not really... I don't see it going anywhere. If they do Classic Plus in the future, it's probably gonna have microtransactions. It's probably gonna fall to a lot of the same mistakes. They have a decade plus track record of, as I said earlier in the video, coming back to their old shit. A lot of you guys might already know because I've talked about this on some of my streams and on previous videos. I was too broke to afford WoW as a kid, and I started playing on private servers. Once I made the agreement though, right, once you hit the accept button when you log in to WoW for the first time officially, you agree to not play on private servers and you could get banned for it. So I haven't played on private servers since then, ever since I started playing on official versions of WoW. I think in 2020, early 2020 was when I started playing Classic, and that was when I got the sub. Haven't played on private servers for a while now, but looking at a lot of these things like Turtle WoW and even Blizz-like private servers like Warmane seem to be handling, like Warmane seems to be handling Wrath of the Lich King better than Blizzard did with Wrath Classic. I thought that I wouldn't really play on private servers anymore, but goddamn is Turtle WoW starting to look appealing. I will not lie, my friends, I am tempted. A proper Classic Plus experience made by the players. I haven't played it. This isn't an advertisement for the server. Not gonna lie, I might play it. Your boy might go back to the old ways. The dark arts. Free, no profit, right? Passion project by the community. I think it's hosted in Russia, so Blizzard can't take it down like they did with Nostalrius. I don't know. Recently, that's what I've been thinking about in regards to WoW, and I might consider giving it a try. Leave a comment, tell me what you think about private servers in general. I don't think it's difficult to see why a franchise like the Warcraft franchise in a game like World of Warcraft matters so much to people. Apart from it just being a damn good game, it existed in a time where there was basically no social media, so it was a way to interact socially, but it also existed in a time where gamers and nerds were pretty much shunned by society, instead of it being mainstream how it is now, so I think it did serve as sort of an escapist home for old school nerds, and of course people are gonna be sentimental about something like that. Classic Plus I think would be a great thing if it was pulled off correctly. There's so many directions that they can go. They could add things that were added, for example, in future expansions, but add them differently. Apart from like the typical things like Outland and Northrend, you got the Broken Isles and the Dragon Isles, an alternate version of those in a classic setting. You have all the cut content like the Nerubian cities from under Northrend, entire cities and areas that were cut from Wrath of the Lich King. You have all these player myths that you could make a reality, like say the Ashbringer or the Tiger Mount that everybody was looking for. Turtle WoW apparently added goblins and high elves, goblins for Horde and high elves for Alliance. I don't see a problem with adding more races or even more classes to Classic. If they added a class like the Necromancer in a Classic Plus, that's like a pipe dream. I realize a lot of what I'm saying now is just, you know, me kind of throwing shit at the wall. My point still stands that there are many things that can be done here and many directions that they could potentially take. However, the primary problem here is Blizzard's general design philosophy seems to always loop back to the way that they're making retail, with, I sound like a broken record, balancing the fun out of shit, the WoW token, pandering to a hardcore audience. They kinda just loop back to these things over and over again. People were happy with the way that Season of Discovery was at first. I mean, it's not like you don't need to try to improve or innovate. Sure, you gotta experiment, but also in the same time, making Season of Discovery or Classic WoW in general more like retail is definitely not something that players wanted. I even like the thing that they did in SOD where they give you an XP buff when you fall behind. I think that the leveling in Classic is long and tedious, especially as a warrior player. They made the leveling faster, but not too fast. I know there's gonna be comments for this like, leveling is part of the journey, it's the main game, it's not like retail. Yes, I agree with that. I was thinking about when I used to play on Warmane as a kid, Wrath of the Lich King private server, and I realized something interesting. The leveling on Warmane is ×7. They have one realm that's ×7 and one realm that's ×1. At first, the ×1 realm was much more popular with a much more higher population than the ×7 realm. People wanted to level ×1, right? The leveling was part of the journey. But because it's only one expansion, people slowly migrated to the ×7 realm and made alts, because I think what it did is, first of all, it gave the game a lot of replayability, because you're not adding new content to the game, so what players are doing is they're trying all these different specs and builds and classes and whatever, and slowly leveling 7 different alts in ×1 leveling speed is not a good time. Doing it once, yeah, it's fun, that's the adventure, but how many times can you do it realistically? It also, another thing that it did is it seemed to maintain the population and keep it high, because the population on those servers is already very healthy, but when players are making alts constantly and leveling them, the world was full. There's max level characters everywhere, there's low level characters everywhere. Whereas on a server with slow leveling, after a while, there will only be max level characters, with very few exceptions to that. Not many people are gonna be leveling anymore. So yeah, I think that's an interesting thing to point out. I don't think that something like ×7 leveling would work out in Classic Plus, but maybe over time as the servers get older, they could add a realm with raised XP rates. Right now, talking off the top of my head, I don't see why that wouldn't work. And of course, they got the route of completely new original content, but I can't say that I trust the Blizzard writing team to come up with stuff like that anymore. The reason that I focused on private servers here is I spent a lot of times looking at them and seeing how are these servers making their custom content differently, and why are these successful ones so successful. It seems like the only private server that the average WoW player has ever heard of is Nostalrius, but there's really nothing special about Nostalrius. It was just vanilla WoW as it was, which I guess at the time was special because Blizzard didn't make it. but they did steal some ideas from private servers with SOD. I feel like they should continue to do that. When Blizzard does not make the things that the community wants, the community makes it for themselves. I think private servers are a pretty good indicator of what the demographics needs are. But yeah, that was pretty much all I wanted to talk about today. Don't forget to check out Zygor, World of Warcraft's greatest add-on, for the best in-game guides available. Link in the description.